Welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing today? My name is David Griscom, broadcasting to y'all live from the great state of Texas. We're all pretty happy around here, still celebrating the good news that the toad himself is dead. We were talking about, of course, none other than Henry Kissinger. Appreciate everyone who hung out with us last night. We had, man, for some of we put together like moment of. It was actually a pretty star-studded cast. We had Ben Burgess, Jason Miles, and our good friend Arm Brown on the program to have a little toast to celebrate the passing of one of the most nasty and terrific ghouls out there, Henry Kissinger. I do have to highly suggest that people go and pick up Jacobin's new book that's out now called Only the Good Die Young. Treatment of Henry Kissinger you can get at the Jacobin website. They wrote that back, man, almost a decade ago, right? I know they've been holding on to those copies for a long while, so really happy that those are coming out and seeing the light of day. So go out there and support Jacobin and the work that they did back then. And I've been seeing people making some great comments about that. It's it's sometimes it's good to be a hater and prepping an entire book years in advance to celebrate the death of a very bad person is some great A hate him. But anyways, let's get into some of these things here, folks. Um, Before we jump into talking a little bit about Kissinger, remember, by the way, too, these are a little bit more relaxed streams, so feel free to jump in with any questions or comments or anything um, that you have. I did just want to remind folks that we are in the midst of our big Left Reckoning merch sale. It really helps us continue to grow the show and expand and do all this kind of coverage. As y'all know, we got our wonderful Left Reckoning hats; those are still for sale. Um, People probably have seen the Fence Cutters hoodie, but we also have these great Left Reckoning, Great Plains t-shirts. So you can get all those at leftreckoning.com/store. It really does help us get them, continue doing the show, continuing to expand and do this kind of work. So if you're able, we're not just asking for donations here. You get something really nice, high quality for it. So please consider checking out the website to get access to all of that. But friends, let's dive in here and make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat either. Celebrating, it's a good thing to celebrate here from Orpheus 311. A first day waking up in a world without Kissinger. The sun was a little bit brighter, the air a little sweeter. I feel the same way. It's been a pretty nice day here. See if there's anything else. Banjo Bill having one of those. Y'all remember when COVID was first hitting? I'm forgetting who it was, but there were all those kind of people who had like maybe gone on a trip or a hike or camping or something like that, and then returned back to society having no idea what just happened. Well, Banjo Bill made a great call yesterday to unplug a little bit and was able to react to the news this morning, which I'm sure was very exciting for you as it was for all of us out there. And let's see. Oh, and hell yeah, the Lord is good. Aaron says there's a literal rainbow outside my window right now. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, folks, so we went pretty in depth with Ben, Jason, and Arm Brown yesterday on Kissinger. I have some more sound for y'all. Um, And also a reminder that I'm going to be going on Ben Burgess's Thursday night debate breakdown, I think at 7 Central. So coming up in just a couple hours too, where there'll be plenty more Kissinger talk. But maybe to sort of set us up. And if you all have any questions or comments or anything you want to get in there, please get those in the chat. Particularly on questions, be sure to at Left Reckoning so I can see them as more and more people are showing up and that chat gets a little bit busier. But I wanted to share a little classic Hitchens on this. This is from his C-SPAN interview promoting his 2001 book, The Case Against Henry Kissinger, which is a great read. Really, succinctly breaks down a lot of these crimes. I will say that from what I've been able to read of Jacobin's new publication on this, which again is available at jacobin.com, a lot of it's already up there for you to read now. But I do suggest picking up that book. I just put in order a couple hours ago. Um, that goes a little bit more in detail, I think, to some of the politics and what that means for the working class and the socialist movement. But Hitchens was one of those people who became very much a Washington insider, despite the fact that that always seems to piss people off when you are upfront and clear about what Hitchens ended up becoming. He was somebody who held on to his hatred of Henry Kissinger up until the end, which is respectable. And he put together a really great case against the many, many crimes of Henry Kissinger. Of course, not the only one. And in fact, a lot of the arguments that he used, were based on the reportings of other people. But he compiled a very readable, accessible, and well-written breakdown of Kissinger, one that I highly suggest. And it's worth picking up and reading. But anyways, let's just play a couple minutes of Hitchens laying out some of the crimes of Henry Kissinger here on C-SPAN back in 2001.
Them to justice.
What's the crime? Name your charge.
In the case of, well, I have, in this opening stave, I have two. One, you might say, was micro, and one was macro. The macro one is Vietnam, is the deliberate extension of the war in Indochina, deliberate extension of it in two ways. First, the attempt by the Nixon team, which involved Mr. Kissinger, in 1968 to undermine the peace negotiations of President Johnson and Vice President Humphrey in Paris by going to the South Vietnamese side and urging them to boycott the negotiations on the promise of a better deal from the Republicans. This is a story you've probably heard in one version or another around the town over the years, but it's become a much harder and firmer story with successive evolutions. And I think I could claim that it's told here all in one piece. At any rate, for the first time, though I've used the work of many other hands to do so. That's the first way the war was extended. The second was to extend it to Cambodia and to Laos by illegal, secret, mass, indiscriminate bombardment of civilians with the knowing and intended result of damaging the civilian population. Now, that was already illegal under the Nuremberg Code, but it's, so to speak, much more illegal now.
Why all these many years later, do you write about this?
Well, as I say, because since General Pinochet's immunity was stripped from him, first by the initiative of a Spanish magistrate, and then by the British House of Lords, and now increasingly, this week, in fact, in the Chilean courts themselves, and since the setting up of the Rome Statute, as the International War Crimes Tribunal is now called, and the indictment of Slobodan Milosevic and his equipe, his aides, we're in a position to revisit some people who were thought invulnerable, who live right here in our own midst. And the Pinochet matter, I think, may be the crucial one, which is part two.
Was it your idea, or was it Harper's Magazine's idea that you do this?
We had a discussion about a year or so ago, and decided that it was time to have a crack at it.
Did Henry, excuse me, did Henry Kissinger talk to you?
He didn't.
Did you try to talk to him?
Sure did. I even offered him money.
What do you mean?
He's a very expensive guy. As you know, if you want to get Henry Kissinger to talk, you have to offer him a big speaker's fee. And when he didn't reply the first time, we said, well, look, name your price. We're not rich, but we'll try and...
How much were you prepared to pay him?
Well, I said we'd pay him what an average Nightline would pay him, because he's been on Nightline with Ted Koppel now upwards of several hundred times, and there are still some very important questions he's never been asked. I said, if you'll agree to answer the questions Ted Koppel doesn't ask you, we'll pay you. We can probably run to a Nightline rate.
So Nightline pays him to go on there?
They used to. I'm sure they still do. He was an official news consultant. Mr. Koppel once refused to tell me how much he was actually paid. Can I just let the other shoe drop on the micro thing in this piece?
Let me grab this call and then we'll come back to it, okay? Mineola, New York, on the Democratic line for Christopher Hitchens.
Calls already.
Hi, Christopher, and I'd like to say it's great for C-SPAN to be reporting so many different aspects of everything. My question regarded that I'd never heard of anything in regards to Mr. Kissinger before in any of the media or on any front line, anything like that. And I was wondering why it's taken so long to come out on something like that then.
Well, I say in my introduction, actually, that one of the things about Mr. Kissinger is his very successful diplomacy with the press. He's not a very successful diplomat in my judgment on other fronts and in other matters. Greatly overrated reputation, in point of fact. But he has managed to get his column syndicated through the Los Angeles Times, and it appears in our hometown here in the Washington Post. He's been a consultant to ABC and I think NBC in his time. He's very frequently referred to on television. He's usually referred to as a referee rather than as a participant. In other words, he's the independent expert. It's not as if he's ever taken any side or any stand or has any interest of his own, though in fact his consulting firm continues to make and reap.
And we could keep letting that go. Again, if people, I'll put this in the chat if people want to watch that entire interview. It's a longer one. It's a good one. Here we go. But don't watch it until we're done here. But I mean, I think that this gets down to a few, I think, top line things on Kissinger. One is the recognition of this person's crimes, right? The role that they played in the brutality in East Timor, in Cambodia. Again, we had Nick Tursh on the program over the summer to talk about more proof, more crimes committed by Henry Kissinger, his direct involvement in some of the most horrific atrocities in Cambodia. And that's something, a guy's turning 100 years old and they're still uncovering stuff that he did half a century ago. That is just how prolific of a butcher, of a monster that this guy Kissinger was. And let's be exceptionally clear here, too, is that, as Hitchens is laying out there's the macro crimes, right, of like the influence, the role that he played in expanding and extending, particularly the war in Vietnam and the bombing campaign in Cambodia. That's odious enough. But on the specific atrocities, on the specific slaughtering of human beings, of the specific raids of villages, and mass slaughtering campaigns in Cambodia, Kissinger not only, for example, like created the context and the ability for these things to happen, but in fact played a direct role, taking extraordinary powers for himself and extraordinary influence, where you had people calling up Henry Kissinger from the front lines of these bombing campaigns, right? That is unprecedented and unbelievable. And I think that you have to remember here that the culpability of Kissinger is really deep. It would be bad enough and the case would be strong enough if you were just sort of focusing on the macro. But the fact is that this is somebody who played, an explicit and, very calculated role in particular atrocities. And again, if you want something more recent, go and read Nick Tursh's reporting in The Intercept. Go and watch an interview that we did with him on this program to get a little bit more detail as to how implicated Henry Kissinger is. So that's the kind of macro thing. And I want to open it up to some questions, and we have some more stuff to get into on this. But there's the secondary nature that I think is a secondary point that I think is important to sort of remember in the context of Henry Kissinger, thankfully no longer breathing the same air as the rest of us. And that is, as Hitchens was just laying out, is the media's role in sort of creating these characters, right? The way that Kissinger just became this elder statesman, was an attempt to do two things at once. One, to sort of whitewash and clean up the bloody legacy of somebody like Kissinger, right? And the bloody legacy of the United States' imperial project in Southeast Asia and all across the globe. But also to create a figure who played a purposeful role in atrocities, in war crimes and crimes against humanity, and just sort of treat those things as like, oh yeah, maybe that's the ugly side of politics, that's the ugly side of history. Can't make an omelet without breaking a couple eggs. Forgive the crassness of that. But that's effectively what Kissinger's role ends up being, right? That's why he gets interviewed on all these kind of programs, is to make excuses, provide justifications for the ongoing American imperialist project, for the ongoing American war crimes, right? This is what this guy's role ends up being. This is somebody who's invited to the White House by Carter, by Obama, by Bush, by Reagan, for years and years and years, after being a member of a disgraced presidential administration. This is somebody who had no right or reason to ever be heard from again. The only reason people should have been hearing about Kissinger in the 80s or in the 90s or in the 2000s should have been, along with a headline that Henry Kissinger has been imprisoned and has been in prison for crimes against humanity. That's the only reason anyone should have been hearing about this guy. But instead, not only does he get away scot free, he is sort of treated as this wonderful, beautiful elder statesman, and spends his entire life being an apologist for American atrocities, and playing a very influential role in the careers, in the minds, and in the thought process of a lot of people who ended up continuing Kissinger's anti-human project in the presidential administrations to come. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything from the chat, though. But we have our good friend in Australia who says, "Do I have your attention? Interest? Are you interested? I know you are, because it's fucker Wong." I don't know what this is. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision. Have you made your decision for Christ? Left Reckoning store. Well, I do appreciate the plug at the end, friend. I have to say I'm not familiar with whatever you're playing with here. Um, we got something from Joe Snuffy who says, "David, not to be a downer, but with the aid of Chat GPT, our leaders can continue to consult with Henry Kissinger from beyond the grave." I mean, effectively, that's what they had been doing when he was alive. It wasn't somebody who you really needed to have tremendous insight to understand what Kissinger's line on politics was going to be. Um, Truly, 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 a good thing that this person is no longer living. And have we seen many of the talks yet? Or sorry, the kind of responses. I have couple here that are just sort of worth reading. This is from Reuters, who sort of compiled a lot of the statements that have been put out this morning. I haven't heard anything official from Joe Biden. I was looking to see if I could find anything from Hillary Clinton. I haven't seen that yet. If that is out there and people know about it, please send it my way. But just going on to the role that this guy continued to play. We have John Kirby, who, as everybody probably has seen, is the national security spokesperson for the Biden administration. This is somebody who has been excusing Biden's complicity in the mass slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza over the past month. What does somebody who has been playing a leading role in maintaining this bombing campaign against millions of people in Gaza? What does he think about Henry Kissinger, who really paved the way for bombing innocent civilians? This is John Kirby, the national security spokesman of Joe Biden, who said, "Quote: It's a huge loss. Whether you saw eye to eye with him on every issue, there's no question that he shaped foreign policy decisions for decades, and he certainly had an impact on America's role in the world." Well, I would rephrase that. He had a major impact in the loss of life for thousands upon thousands of people across the globe for participating in the overthrow of the democratically elected leader in Chile. And I think he should be remembered by one of his most infamous quotations, Henry Kissinger, who said famously in regards to Cambodia, "Bomb anything that flies or anything that moves." And that was the mentality of Kissinger and those folks at this time. Now, we have a few more. We got W. We talked about W last night, what he said. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary of the U.S., said he was the rare scholar turned strategist, and he has been widely hailed as one of our most powerful and influential secretaries of state. I sought his geopolitical perspective repeatedly over the course of my career, and always found our exchanges thought provoking. Again, this is the kind of laundering for somebody who is one of the most bloody and brutal proponents of mass slaughter in American history, and that's a tall order. Remember that in Cambodia, the United States dropped more explosives than it did upon the entirety of Europe during World War II. It's one of those things. If you haven't been to that part of the world, or if you haven't read up on it, it's really easy to miss the devastation that the United States caused in that part of the world, and putting it into that kind of context of recognizing the scale of the devastation, and again, for what? For what? Other than to punish and slaughter anybody who wasn't sort of standing within the within the American vision of the world. Truly, truly, one of the most despicable motherfuckers that you can see or think about. If anyone has any thing else on that, I'd be happy to pop it up. If not, we do have a couple more stories to get to. And just a reminder, I'm going to be on Ben Burgess's program at 7, talking a little bit more about Kissinger. So I don't want to front load too much. Um, on that. But I think that, I'm sorry to if I'm being a bummer because I know we're supposed to just be celebrating and playing the crab song and all that, and I'm all for it. I think that's good. I think having somebody like Henry Kissinger sort of be mocked for his legacy to be seen clearly as one of a brutal, evil human being, one who the world is better off without. Um, I think that there's that's just an important thing. So I'm not going to sit around and say, "Oh, we shouldn't be feeling that way." But how can we sort of orient ourselves? And I said it last night, and I'll say it again that I think that really, the thing that is tough about Kissinger's death is that he got the world that he wanted. He lived his entire life comfy and cushy, although there were many countries that he could not go to. Because he would be arrested, particularly Spain, and certainly is somebody who would not be welcome in many, many other parts of the world. It was somebody who just had a first um, hand role in so many of the atrocities of the 20th century. And he was an influential member of the United States government, had his career completely whitewashed by the media, was treated by the rich and powerful as a wonderful and brilliant human being. I mean, don't forget this is somebody who was not only influential when it came to politics, but somebody who ended up being a very, very influential player in Wall Street and across corporate America, particularly in the 21st century. So this is somebody who got a lot of reward for the atrocities that he committed. And as much as I'm happy that he is gone, that even he can't cheat death. He lived to be 100 years old. So, like, where can we sort of find any solace in this? The first one is the most human and basic one is that he's dead. The motherfucker is dead. That is a good thing for humanity. To have that person no longer breathing, no longer having influence, no longer being invited to speak. That's a good thing. Just easy, net positive. The other thing is that it sort of puts the pressure on us to break down the institutions that elevated somebody like Kissinger um, into a life of comfort and influence. We have to break those things down. And we have the opportunity to do it, right? The past is the past. That sometimes is hard to deal with. But the future is still unwritten. And I think that, the hope is that with the toad gone, we can continue to do the work of educating people, to reorienting people, and breaking down these brutal structures of imperialism and capitalism that delivered somebody like Henry Kissinger into prominence, caused and influenced and encouraged him into promoting and advocating for and engaging with atrocities. That we just have more and more of a kind of need to think about ways to do something. But let's get to, unless there's anything else in there, let's get to some positives here. Well, I mean, that is already positive. Kissinger's gone, but um, we have some other good things that I want to get into before I run. And again, I'm being Ben Birch's program in just a little bit. And before we go any further, Daniel Burton does have a question here. Says, David, thoughts on the squad vote on the right of Israel to exist? I mean, extremely disappointing because it's not just quote the right of Israel to exist. it specifically affirms that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish supremacist state. Which is just at the end of the day, what we have seen very clearly in Gaza in the Israeli war against the Palestinians, is that it is just clear as day that if you support an ethno state, you also support the atrocities that ethno state takes on. And why is that? Me taking a maximalist position or something like that? No, it is just a true objective fact that if you say that there is a group of people who we believe that are supreme, that we believe should have different rights, that we believe have inherently more value and more humanity than other people, it necessitates that state is going to have to enact violence, oppression, and tiered status for other people. That's just it. It's just this shouldn't be controversial at this point. So anyone sitting around here and continuing to defend a state being able to define itself on religious or nationalist lines um, is saying that yeah, it's okay for these things. Now, with the squad's vote, find it to be the members of the squad who voted for it. I find it to be exceptionally disappointing. Um, it's frustrating. I certainly wouldn't advise anyone to vote in that way. I don't think it's very reflective of the groundswell of public support that we have in this country to end the slaughter of Palestinians, to actually move to a real viable attempt to build up a state that is not predicated on the supremacy of one group over another. So it's exceptionally disappointing. This isn't any kind of apologetics for that. But I will say that there's sometimes this tendency, particularly online, to sort of look at things like that as it's not without it's not that there's a context that makes it better, but there's scales of things. Because one thing that I think has been very true is that members of the squad have been exceptionally influential in pushing, for example, for the ceasefire, and not the watered down bullshit, temporary humanitarian pause, but advocating for ceasefire, and now pushing for a more permanent, end of hostilities and of bombing in Gaza by Israel. And if you don't look at what that role has been from those elected officials, how that is sort of reflective of a movement of people who are sort of pressuring and building and creating space, for those kind of political positions and votes, I think you can get really, really distracted basically by saying, "Oh, I've seen this," which is effectively a statement from the United States government, and it's a disgusting statement. It's one that I condemn, and it's one that I think again creates the rhetorical opportunity for justifying the continuation of the slaughter of Palestinians. So it's not a defense of that vote. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrongheaded, and I think it's dangerous. But it's just funny to me where people sometimes they see the symbolic vote and they sort of put that over the material decisions, over the material role that people, like Rashida Tlaib has been standing, and Jamal Bowman, and I'm probably and Corey Bush, and I might be forgetting other people who've shown up, have been showing up and standing in solidarity with the hunger strikers outside of the White House. Right? That is something that matters. The position and the role of these people that they've been sort of pressuring the government, and I think playing not perfect, but I think that it's have been stronger than we might have thought, maybe going into this conflict from some of these folks. I just think it's important to be able to judge these things and view these things in their whole, instead of what always happens, particularly with these more symbolic votes, is as a kind of reflection of everything that's happening. And I think that it behooves you, and it's helpful to actually have a better understanding of the kind of entirety of the advocacy that we've seen from members as well. Not saying it's been perfect. We've been very quick to criticize and happy to on this program, not just since the beginning of this conflict, but from the very get go. But I think that sometimes there are certain figures out there who will focus on that sort of solely and have never really paid attention to or talked about any of the other things that have happened. I don't know if that was. I hope that was helpful for you there. And I totally agree with Lenny here too, that the squad vote is dumb. considering the fact that APAC is already going to fund primary challengers against them anyway. I completely agree. It's not like it even opens up any space or gives them any kind of protection. No, it's cowardly. It's basically though. I think that at the end of the day, what it is this. This is a symbolic vote of saying the United States Congress thinks this. Didn't feel like it was something that was worth getting worked up about. I disagree with that position. But I think that was generally the calculus. But as Lenny is saying correctly here, it's not like it helps you out at all. It's not like APAC is no longer going to try to fund candidates to run against Jamal Bowman and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and AOC and Cory Bush and all these figures because of the way that certain people voted on this. That's 100% true. So you don't really get much for it. That I don't. So I don't think that it's worthwhile to engage in that in any way. I just think that like our frustrations have to be sort of scaled in reaction in the proper proportion to what has been done. All right. Let's Sean says, David, did you attend the rally for Palestine at the Capitol a few weeks ago? It was truly inspirational. Hashtag free Palestine. If you're talking about the Capitol, Texas, yes, I was there. It was incredibly exceptional showing. I felt very proud of the Palestinian peace movement. I felt very proud of all of the great advocates and folks in the state of Texas coming together and putting that march and that rally together. It was absolutely massive. One of the largest ones I've ever been to in my life for Palestine, in DC or in New York or in Texas. It was something else. So I was very happy to be a part of that. It meant a lot, I think, to a lot of folks out there. Well, folks, let's jump over to some more good news. And this is something from the UAW. And I'm going to play this video for y'all because I think this is exactly where things need to be going. It's exceptionally exciting. This is from the United Auto Workers Union, which, as everybody knows, just came off of a massive victory in their contract negotiations with the Big Three. And I'm not going to sit here. I mean, I'm being a little selfish here, but who gives a shit? It's the Griscom stream. We're allowed to be a little petty. There were a lot of really concerned people on the left about the United Auto Workers Union, right? About, maybe the stand-up strike is going to be about demobilizing the working class, and actually Sean Fain is just trying to shepherd people into the Democratic Party. These kind of critiques that people make, if you ever notice, they start to rhyme, right? That they start to sound the same no matter who it is that they're talking about, no matter what the context is, and no matter what the reality or the end result is. That should start to ring some alarm bells in your head that even though these criticisms might sound like they're actually agitating for something radical, aren't properly rooted in material or political reality. And I don't mean that even in the sense of like, oh, the horizons are so limited. I mean that in the sense that, like, if your criticism is already ready made before something has happened, then it probably is not a very well thought out criticism. And one thing that we have seen from Sean Fain and from this democratization project within the United Auto Workers Union has been that this union is leading the way for a more militant, for a more class rooted, and for a more agitational position than we have seen in the labor movement in a long, long, long time. So coming after this victory, are they going on vacation? And taking some big breaks or anything like that? No, it is full pedal to the metal. The fight is continuing. And let's just listen to this video put out by the United Auto Workers Union just the other day.
If you're an auto worker in this country, it's time to stand up. Everywhere you look in the auto industry, corporate profits are soaring and workers' wages are falling behind. We've shown the world that this industry is harming workers and consumers to the benefit of company executives and the rich. And it's time that the working class did something about it. But it's not just the Big Three. It's across the auto industry. CEOs are raking in billions while auto workers' real wages are falling. Car prices are through the roof, but workers can't afford to buy the vehicles they make. Wall Street is making a killing, but our communities are being left behind.
Tesla set to announce their third quarter results, but that they still aim to keep annual target deliveries of 1.8 million vehicles for the full year.
Rivian boosting its full year production. The company also second quarter revenue coming in better than the street was looking for.
But what about the other automakers? Let's talk about Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Nissan, Subaru, and Mazda. The Japanese and Korean six made nearly twice as much as the big three in the past decade. A whopping $470 billion in profits, $500 billion, with over 40% of their revenue coming from their North American operations. Don't auto workers at Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Nissan, Subaru, and Mazda deserve a record cut of those record profits? And how about the German three, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes? They've made almost the same as the Japanese and Korean companies, $460 billion in the past 10 years. Do Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes workers not deserve their fair share of this booming auto industry? Big three auto workers at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis just won big raises, more job security, and cost of living adjustments for one simple reason: they're organized.
Without a deal, automakers went on strike at midnight.
With targeted strikes at 3 facilities, a Ford plant in Michigan, a GM plant in Missouri, and an Ohio plant for Chrysler owner Stellantis.
The UAW was underestimated the whole way because when the game was over, it was just a real beatdown. The workers win.
To all the auto workers out there working without the benefits of a union, now it's your turn. Since we began our stand-up strike, the response from auto workers at non-union companies has been overwhelming. Workers across the country, from the West to the Midwest, and especially in the South, are reaching out to join our movement and to join the UAW. So go to uaw.org/join. The money is there, the time is right, and the answer is simple.
Let's go. And I mean, this is exactly what you do, by the way, after winning a major contract like that, is you put it on the offensive and you say to all of the other workers in non-union facilities, hey, you see what we're getting over here? You want more, you want better for your life, you want better for your family, you want better for your community, join the union, and we can get that as a united push. I think it is. This is one of the most exciting and important things that we have seen in the left in a long while. If we can actually really, continue supporting the UAW and all these other unionization efforts, but especially supporting these attempts to be more militant, to be more democratic internally, we will be in a much, much stronger place for winning the things that the working class so desperately needs in this country. And all that we have seen from Sean Fain and the UAW is a continued commitment to being strategic, right? That's the whole thing with the stand-up strike. To being militant, right? Eat the rich T-shirts. Incredible tactics like misinformation, misdirection against the company, and a willingness to call out public officials, ownership of these companies. And doing it all with a very, very strong grassroots from the bottom up kind of orientation to the UAW structure and its strategizing, something that we haven't seen for a long while in the labor movement. As people remember, specifically the contracts that were negotiated by the UAW with the big three are set to expire on May Day, a few years from now. And the call from the UAW was for the rest of the labor movement to get their contracts to expire on the same day so that the working class can start doing something that hasn't been done in this country in a long time, which is actually connecting the different labor struggles amongst each other, right? There are great examples, for example, of things like Teamsters. They're not going to deliver or pick up from a company on strike, right? That is exactly, the kind of solidarity that is baked into the union movement is important. But I'm talking about mass coordination of the working class, of the union movement as a whole. We haven't seen that. We have not seen that in my lifetime for sure. And that's exactly the kind of thing that you need from the union movement because, what we have is we have certain people who have been represented by unions in this country. Some of those unions have been stronger than others. Some of those have been more democratic than others. What we're seeing right now across the spectrum in the union movement from a lot of those more established unions has been a deep push to democratize those unions. Remember, Sean Fain is elected as the result of turning the UAW unions leadership elections into a one member, one vote system, which ended up resulting in a much more militant leadership within the UAW, which we saw got the goods when it came down to the fight with the big three. So what we're seeing right now is a union movement that is resurgent, that is being ambitious, and now actually has that thing that we always talk about on this program. If you've been watching me for a long time, what do I always tell people that is the big hurdle for left-wing politics in this country? A lot of times we talk about the policies, the vision, all these kind of things. That's all well and good. But you can talk about the future that you want all, till the cows come home. But if people don't actually believe that participating in your organizations, that participating in those movements can actually be effective at improving their lives, they won't do it. Right. And that is the kind of uphill battle. It's a tension, right? There's a paradox here because in order to win the things that we need, you have to have people, right? But to be able to get people on the mass scale that we need, you also have to be getting victories in the kind of immediate short term. The UAW is showing exactly how to do that because now that they've been able to win these record contracts with the big three, now they can go to Toyota workers. Now they can go to Tesla workers. Now they can go to the rest of the Korean companies and say, hey, this is what happens when you're in a union. Why don't you join us? Particularly in the South, as they noted in that video, because the South has been used to create more internal competition within the United States amongst workers. Right, moving companies, moving plants, moving distribution facilities into the South means that you go into a part of the country that has lower rates of unionization, that has workers that are poor and a little bit more desperate. And this is a great way for the UAW to be able to say, like, look. One, yes, it's scary, to go up and fight against these companies. But when you fight against them and you're united and you're committed, you can win. And it's got some boys, particularly a guy named Elon Musk, very, very, very scared. And we have some video on that we'll play in just a minute. But I want to make sure I'm not missing anything from the chat here, as we like to keep these streams a little bit more interactive. Our good friend Byron Man says, why do centrist to center left folks think we can wait to do the right thing just to please knuckle draggers with a warped no moral compass? While we wait, many just suffer from unjust lives. Well, I'll tell you, at least when it comes to the political figures involved, the centrist, the neoliberals, however you want to describe those folks, is because effectively their role is not actually to deliver things for people, but to try and manage democracy. And how do I mean that? I mean that in the sense that, look at the way that the Democratic Party functions in the United States of America. Democratic Party's argument is basically this. The Republican Party is trying to pursue a dystopia that is worse than what you're experiencing right now. So you need to sort of line up with us so that we can prevent the right from taking power. Now, when we're in power, we don't want to shake the boat too much, because if we shake the boat too much, then we might lose power, and then that bad dystopian scenario that I lined up before you will happen. Well, the problem with that is that if you basically are just managing decline of the American economy, of the livelihood of American workers, sooner or later people are going to fall off and they're going to stop voting. So what the Democratic Party basically tries to do is to utilize the fear of the right, and basically just run on that and hold on to that. And their biggest threat to what is for them a very lucrative position, right? This is an incredibly lucrative position, both financially and in the sense of power, right? Because the Democratic Party gets to be dominant in states like California, gets to be dominant in states like New York, has a map that is exceptionally favorable to them on the national level. And certainly can get guys who can barely even form a coherent sentence like Joe Biden into the presidency. Well, what is the biggest threat to those people who basically are sitting in that position of saying, hey, we're against the right? Well, the biggest threat is people to their left who are saying, hey, well, not only should we be beating the right, but yeah, I think Americans deserve health care. Americans deserve higher wages. We should do something about climate change that is actual and improves people's lives instead of punishes people. Um, well, that's a huge threat to the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party does two things, right? One, it rigs its party and its institutions against left wing challengers. Two, it tries to sideline and attack members. Even if we want to, criticize people like members of the squad, there is no doubt about it that within the Democratic Party, those people are in a hostile environment. Right, the Democratic Party leadership doesn't stand with them. Um, as we saw, obviously, with Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Party is very quick to change the rules of engagement for its primaries. And, the Democratic Party basically has to operate in this position of saying, hey, we do think that there's some better things out there that we could be doing, but we basically can never do it until the right goes away. But it creates a situation. Again, this is all on purpose, by the way, too, because to do something um, that would like actively improve the lives and livelihoods of American workers would mean confronting American capital, would mean confronting American capitalists from the healthcare industry to the bosses and employers for people in all sorts of industries across this country who make up major parts of the donor base and the power base for the Democratic Party. So what the Democratic Party basically tries to negotiate is saying, hey, yeah, we do like all these things maybe one day in the future, but we have to defeat the right. But because they don't want to do anything to improve people's lives in a dramatic and drastic way in the near to short term future, the right always exists. And in fact, the right can sometimes gain power or enthusiasm, as we've seen with Donald Trump's first presidential run, and as we're seeing in this disastrous situation, like that looks like it's cooking up in 2024, with the potential resurgence of Donald Trump. And that's not to mention what life is like for millions of Americans, myself included, who live in states like Texas that have been dominated by the right wing since the neoliberal turn of the Democratic Party. So when it comes to the centrists, I think that like treating them as if there's a problem of their moral compass. I think you're actually from operating from the wrong starting point. Obviously, there's something wicked and wrong about the political positions that they take, about their opposition and the role that they play in trying to stifle working movements, more democratic movements, more left wing movements in this country. Obviously, morally bankrupt. But the reason that they do that is because they are operatives of an economic system of a class of people, the rich and the powerful in this country, who benefit from the pain and suffering of millions of Americans. So they have no interest or reason to ever want to challenge that. So they do rhetorical things like, as Matt and I always call Joe Biden, he's the press release president. He's somebody who's like, I see you and I hear you, right? That's about as far as it goes. And that's effectively the mindset and the strategy of the Democratic Party today. And it puts us all in tremendous danger, as we were saying, because it doesn't vanquish the right. In fact, it maintains their permanence in American politics. All right, let's see. And again, I'm going to be on Ben Burgess's program at 7 Central in just an hour. So if you want to see us talk a little bit more Kissinger stuff, be sure to join us there. But before we go, I wouldn't be doing my job if we didn't talk a little bit about Elon Musk. And I would play this. People have probably seen this. Musk had a complete meltdown at a New York Times event just a couple days back. Here's him throwing a hissy fit over the fact that major companies are no longer wanting to advertise on Twitter. And again, the reason that companies don't want to advertise on Twitter is because Twitter has become a place that has become very, very favorable and protective of hate speech, of neo-Nazism. And Elon Musk, of course, got into a lot of trouble for tweeting that he agrees with a Twitter user who basically was saying some pretty egregious stuff about Jewish people in this country. But here's his meltdown. We're not going to spend too much time on this because I actually want to talk a little bit more about some things that he said about unions here. But this is a guy this is a rich guy having a meltdown because he's having to deal with other wealthy people who aren't wanting to do what he says.
apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself.
But
go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
Well, let me ask you then.
So that's our exceptionally unhinged guy. And by the way, like, let's just be very clear, because, you know, all the little losers out there who get a lot of money from Elon Musk, by the way, it's always funny. Somebody like Musk, you know, who is basically famous for being a rich guy, sitting around here and talking about how he doesn't care about money is pretty rich. Because the reason he's pissed is because the advertisers have been pulling from his company have cost Twitter $75 million alone, and that's not even getting into the other kind of mismanagement failures of somebody like Elon Musk within Twitter. But he's pissed about the money, and he's trying to come up with a kind of reason that, oh, actually, I'm not sort of failing, that my entire model of business for Twitter isn't a complete disaster. He wants to sort of say, like, oh, actually, no, I'm trying to take a moral stand to make sure that Pepe the Frog can, you know, post more Hitler memes online. And, you know, I'm standing up for free speech. As we've seen, you know, Musk has been very heavy-handed when it comes to free speech for people who are saying, hey, stop the slaughter of Palestinians. Right. So the free speech that he's talking about is very clear what it is that he's talking about, boosting and protecting on his platform. But, you know, there's a lot of other people who spend a lot of time talking about the free speech stuff. There's a part of it that gets a little bit boring to me, I have to admit, because what matters to me more about Musk than, for example, what he's doing on Twitter is actually his role as somebody who owns a major car corporation that has some of the worst conditions for working people. As people know, we had Gus Bove on this program to talk about one of the deaths that happened at the Gigafactory here in the Austin area recently because of the management of the Tesla company. And we've seen these incredible strikes in Europe at these Tesla facilities where Elon Musk and Tesla are now basically trying to use the government to silence workers' free speech. Again, you know, you can only point out hypocrisy so much, I know, but very, 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 very rich to see somebody like Musk talk about free speech when you know the way that he operates his companies. But we played the UAW video just a second ago about how the UAW is expanding, growing the organization, how exciting that is, how important it is, and one of their targets is Tesla, which is a great thing. Here's Elon Musk talking about his problems with unions. And surprise, surprise, the rich boy doesn't very much like unions. But his argument here is pretty exceptional.
I disagree with the idea of unions, but perhaps for a reason that is different than people may expect, which is I just don't like anything which creates kind of a lords and peasants sort of thing. And I think the unions naturally try to create negativity in a company and create a kind of sort of lords and peasants situation. There are many people at Tesla who have gone from working on the line to being in senior management. There is no lords and peasants. Everyone eats at the same table. Everyone parks in the same parking lot. You know, at GM, there's a special elevator only for senior executives. We have no such thing at Tesla. You know, and the thing is that I actually know the people on the line because I worked on the line and I walked the line and I slept in the factory and I worked beside them. So I'm no stranger to them. And there are actually many times where I've said, well, can't we just hold a union vote? But apparently a company is not allowed to hold a union vote. So it has to be somehow called for, but the unions can't do it. So I said, well, let's just hold a vote and see what happens. The actual problem is the opposite. It's not that people are trapped at Tesla building cars. The challenge is how do we retain great people to do the hard work of building cars when they have like 6 other opportunities that they can do that are easier. That's the actual difficulty, is that building cars is hard work, and there are much easier jobs. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly appreciative of those who build cars, and they know it. So there's I don't know, maybe there will be unionized. If I say, like, if Tesla gets unionized, it will be because we deserve it and we failed in some way.
All right, we don't need to hear any more of that. So it's so fucking good. I mean, so first of all, I mean, a completely ludicrous argument, for example, that unions create division in a company. What unions do is they actually accentuate and provide a platform for working people to be able to speak collectively in a terrain that is uneven. Because if you go up as an individual to Elon, if one of fucking Elon Musk's employees, Elon Musk is somebody who has been exposed time and time again through all of the reporting and the in-depth investigations into the way that he manages his companies to be a real snivelly and pathetic tyrant. He is somebody who will let people go for challenging him in meetings. That is documented. That is documented. So Elon Musk saying like, "Oh, I walk the lines. I walk the lines of the company, and everyone seems to love me so much." Well, you've created a dynamic and an expectation of fear and retaliation within your companies. That is documented. That is a documented fact, particularly about Tesla, but it's just a universal fact of working anywhere in this country, or anywhere in the world, is that the boss has tremendous power over you. So the way that you interact with that boss is going to be mediated, right, is going to be reflective of that power imbalance. The only way to rectify that power imbalance is to allow people who work in a certain position in a company to speak and advocate for each other collectively. Because one person can be fired. An entire company, it's a lot harder to fire all the workers at a car company, because guess what? You don't got any cars, right? So the first idea here is that, like, oh, Tesla is some kind of egalitarian, beautiful place where Elon Musk is just giving everyone hugs and kisses as they're sweating and working away, building his vehicles, is bullshit. The second aspect, this lords and peasants thing, right? Oh, so you don't have. I love this kind of shit so much. This is such a classic, very much tech world, Silicon Valley BS, where they sort of act like, oh, well, we don't have, these certain kind of privileges for certain people. We don't wear suits. The C-suite, the leadership of the company doesn't wear suits. We wear jeans, right? As if that creates some kind of real egalitarianism, is absolutely BS. Because you want to talk about lords and peasants, you're one of the wealthiest people in the world. Are Tesla employees some of the wealthiest people in the world? I mean, what the hell are we talking about here, lords and peasants? This is somebody who has more money than any human being should ever have in their life. Talking about how he doesn't want there to be a lords and peasants dynamic. He's living in that world right now. In fact, this is somebody who, because of this system, is the equivalent of a lord of old, right? The fact is that this is somebody who has incredible immunity legally, politically, and certainly economically from the rest of us. This is somebody who exists on a different level. You have the government of the United States of America tripping over itself to not offend or hurt this guy's feelings, because the United States government, has to rely on somebody like this, because he runs companies in the United States for whatever reason, failures certainly, but right now is incredibly reliant on. The lords and peasants dynamic thing is absolutely ludicrous. When again, we were talking about the power dynamic on the shop floor. That is not a place of like equality or egalitarianism. Certainly not. Are we kidding ourselves here? Certainly not in terms of pay, because somebody like that gets paid a hell of a lot more the rest of his employees, and certainly not in the context of safety, as we see. The danger of working at Tesla facilities, the literal death of employees, people working to construct the factories that he's building here in Texas, right? Sitting here talking about, oh yeah, it's not a dynamic of the lord and peasant is absurd, right? Literally in the piece that Gus Bova wrote in Texas Observer, looking over the case of this death here. I'm paraphrasing, but the quotes were along the lines of like, every day I feel like I may die at work, right? And unfortunately, somebody did. So sitting here and saying, oh, there's no kind of lord and peasants dynamic, that is the literal 21st century example of that same kind of dynamic. So that's absolute bullshit. And the last thing, and this is the most classic, right? Too, is oh, it's really hard for Tesla to be able to maintain employees because there's easier jobs out there, which is effectively saying the vast majority of people are lazy, but we have these people who love cars so much they're willing to sacrifice. Well, somebody like Elon Musk should be the one sacrificing, because if you want to talk about love of vehicles, right, love of cars or something like that, and that is sort of the pitch. You've lost the argument, because what you should be offering people is safe working conditions, high rates of pay. And that's the exact things that the unions are going to be advocating for. So if that's something that you're already willing to offer, if that's something that you pride yourself on, then what is so scary about a union saying, "Hey, we just want to make sure that all of the employees working at this facility are getting paid fair wages for the work that they're doing, are having their salaries be reflective of the value that they bring to this company," which, by the way, is it. They're the people who create the value at the company, um, and also want to make sure that they have safety and protection and the ability to go home at the end of the day and not fear, as some of these other people were quoted as saying, that they may die at work. Complete bullshit, an absolute tyrant, and I really can't wait for Sean Fain to be sitting across from somebody like that in the negotiating room and winning those victories for workers. Folks, on that note, I'm going to run. I appreciate all of y'all so much. Please, holiday season, help Left Reckoning grow. Get some of this really great merch. We got the Left Reckoning caps. We got the Left Reckoning fence cutters sweatshirt, and we also have this really cool Left Reckoning Great Plains t-shirt, as well as our Big Techs on Fire tank tops. They're all available at leftreckoning.com/store. Picking up one of those, wearing it around, one helps us spread the word about the program. They look really cool, and it also helps Matt and I keep doing the show and continuing to grow. I appreciate all of y'all so much. I'm going to be on Ben Burgess's show in just an hour. We're going to be talking a little bit more Henry Kissinger. So come by and hang out with us. I really appreciate all of y'all. We'll be back this Sunday with a bonus episode. We'll see the rest of y'all on Tuesday with the main show. Take care. Have a good weekend, and see you soon.